Praise the Lord, everybody, and good morning to everyone that's on the line. Uh, our lesson today will be coming out of the book of Ruth. Um, it's huh? December 3rd. You're right. It's right after the book of Judges. Um, a unifying topic this morning is the faith of Ruth. And our background passage is Ruth, first chapter, verses 4, chapter 4, verses 13 through 22, and Les's passage also Ruth, chapter 1, verse 6 through 18, and verse 22. Our lesson text, and I have three, is Naomi plans to leave her daughters-in-law. That's Ruth, first chapter, verses 6 through 9. And our second lesson text is Naomi plead for her daughters to leave her. Ruth, first chapter, verses 10 through 13. And our third lesson text is the loyalty of Ruth. Ruth, chapter 1, verses 14 through 18, and verse 22. The main thought, and Ruth said, entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. Whether thou go, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. The people shall be my people, and thy God my God. And that's Ruth chapter 1, verses 16. A little bit of the background in this particular book. Let's look at our characters. Main characters are Ruth, Naomi, and Abimelech. Okay, thank you, Jim. And they got some supporting characters as well, which is Mahlon and Chilion, which are Ruth's, Naomi's sons. The book starts out as there's a famine in the land, and of course I want to reflect back real quick to Judges. It's right after the book of Judges, and during that time in Judges, there were some dark times, like 400 years, dark times, and there was no kings at that time. So the people were going through some things, some troubling times, and God had adversaries to come against them, and so they were going through some things. And once they started following God, God would raise up a judge and lead the people through that crisis, and then they would go right back into to not obeying God and following God. And so at the end of Judges, people were doing what was right in their own eyes at that point. And so then it goes into the book of Ruth, which is a real good book, very good book. It was, again, like I said, it was during the time when they had judges, and there was a famine in the land. And of course, we're going through some bad times again, the Israelites. So Abimelech, he decided to move his family to Moab, which is like 50 miles away or so, to another place. So he's actually leaving. He decided to leave the the land of milk and honey and go to somewhere he thought was better. Um, and sometimes, as we go through the lesson, we're going to find out that you can make decisions to do things in life, but you got to have God. You got to trust God. You got to ask Him if that's God, if that's His will. You just can't jump up and do things on your own. And so that's what he did. He decided to take his family and move to Moab. In the process of moving, he gets there in Moab, gets set up, and he takes his two sons, which is Mahlon's his wife Naomi. And when he gets there, Elimelech dies. He dies. And so that left Naomi and the two sons. And eventually they were of age, so they were seeking wives, and they got married to Moab women. And of course, Mahlon's name means puny or piney. That's what his name means. And Kilion's name means weak or sickly. And so after being there about 10 years, the two sons dies. And that only left Naomi and the sister-in-laws, which were Ruth and daughter-in-laws, which was Ruth and Oprah. So as we get into the lesson, we'll reflect back to this point where, she made some decisions, but we're going to try to figure out what was going on. Was God against her, or was she just acting on her own, or whatever the case might be? All right. So, and we start out in our first lesson text. Naomi plans to leave her daughter-in-laws. And this is at verse 6. So they're in Moab. The two sons had died. Her husband had died. And verse 6, then she arose with her daughter-in-laws, that she might return from the country of Moab. For she had heard in the country of Moab how that the Lord had visited his people and given them bread. Now, so she's in Moab, and she's heard that the famine is over. She heard that, and of course she's lost her husband, Elimelech, and she lost her two sons. So she makes a decision that she's going to go back. Everything is going well in Bethlehem. Forgot to tell you that. The Bethlehem means the house of bread. Thank you, Jimmy. And Bethlehem and Judah. So she decides to go back. Now, earlier in the introduction, I said that they had judges during that time, and the people of Israel, when they were not being obedient, then God would bring different situations upon them to try to get them back in line. And so that famine is over, she's heard, and she wants to return. They've been there about 10 years. So she wants to return and go back to the house of bread, the land of milk and honey. And she gets up and she makes that decision, which it probably was pretty easy for her to make. She had no family there. Things are going well, and she wanted to go back, which makes sense. And that's, in a sense, going back to God, because she left Bethlehem, and she left the tabernacle, and they had pagan gods there in Moab. So it's best for her to go back. That's the best decision she made, to go back to God, to go back to her tabernacle and leave those pagan gods away. Now, why they went to that, they worship idols and had pagan gods, I don't know. But it was the period where everybody did what was right in their own eyes. And for us, when we make decisions like that, we need to consult God. We need to go to the Bible, see what instructions or commands are in there. You need to pray and ask this if it's God's will. You need to consult a Christian brother or sister and ask them their opinion about it. And then you got to just trust God and ask him if it's his will, not yours, not the fleshly part of it, the spiritual part. And if it's his will, you will know it. You will know it. I think back to Paul, and when Paul used to go and was doing missionary work, and how the Holy Spirit would come on him and would prevent him from going certain places. And that's what we gotta do. We gotta consult God, because a lot of times He'll direct us in what we should do. Right. And again, he just made a decision to go. It goes back to, seeking if that's the right thing to do. They were going through the famine. He made a decision to get out of town. Now, it doesn't say if he consulted God about it. He just went. So, and I mean, even though the times were bad, it was going to get better.
Jose, well, the way he didn't consult God, but God had a path. It was God's will. So God moved the men out of the way. He just moved the men out of the way.
You'll see, things. Yeah, he moved them out of the way because he wanted them to return. They ran from God. I put it that way. Instead of running to him. When we go through situations, we shouldn't run from the situation, because the situation is always going to follow. And when you get to that place that you're going, or that move that you made, that situation will still exist. That situation is you. So they had a situation, and Abimelech decided to pick the family up and move, and it just wasn't he didn't put any thought into it, I don't think. He should have been running to God. That's why they was going through the situation, because God was trying to tell him, be obedient, come back to me.
And that's how the drought or the famine came about in the first place, because they were disobedient. They were disobedient. Had they obeyed God, this wouldn't have taken place.
Yep.
And so, like many of us, when God is a little slow according to our time schedule, we want to move and get ahead of God. And that's what Elimelech did. So we have to point a finger at Elimelech, because Naomi wouldn't have gone if the hubby hadn't taken the lead.
All right. Thank you. Verse 7. Wherefore she went forth out of the place where she was, which was Moab, and her 2 daughter-in-laws with her, and they went on their way to return unto the land of Judah. to the land of milk and honey. Verse 8, and Naomi said unto her two daughter-in-laws, go, return each of her to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you as ye has dealt with me and the dead, with the dead and with me. Okay, so in verse 8, Naomi is actually blessing her daughter-in-law. She's giving them her blessing that it's okay to go back to your mother's house. And she also thanked them for being kindly with her and for, being with her as she experienced the loss of her husband and her sons. And, of course, the daughter-in-laws, they had lost their husbands. And so everybody was just, it was just a bad situation for them. And so Naomi blessed them to go back to their own home. You got to think, they had been married to their husbands for 10 years. And so by them being in a pagan land, they pick up those pagan ways. And that's why it was, the law prohibit them from marrying pagan women or, anybody other than, God knew that. He knew that, that they would be led astray. But in this case, the two sons died, and Naomi is returning back to Judah. So she thanked them. She wanted them to go back to their mother's house. Verse 9, the Lord grants you that ye may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lift up their voices and wept. So she blessed them to go back to their mother's house. She was going to return back to Judah. She was hoping that they would find rest, and again, she was also hoping that they would find husbands, and that's what the husband at that time would provide for his wife: rest. It would be a safe place. She'd be taken care of. So she was praying that those things would happen to them. And so that was her plan for her daughter-in-laws in the first text, the first lesson text. The second lesson text, Naomi pleaded for her daughters to leave her. So in verse 10, and they said unto her, surely we will return with thee unto thy people. So they were willing to go with her, and they did. They were willing to go with her. Of course, they didn't have a God, and they pagan, they worship idols and everything. Think about it. They putting themselves in a bad position to return back to Judah, and they were willing to do that. And I think because the love that they had for Naomi and the love they had for their ex-husbands and stuff, the deceased husband. So they were willing to leave everything and go back, leave everything in Moab and go back to Judah. And God's working in this too, because he's bringing Ruth back to him. She went away, she went through some things, her circumstances, and it's kind of like the prodigal son. His pockets was fat. He went out, experienced a world, and he had eventually returned back to God. And that's us. If we get off track things, different situations, don't give up. Go back to God. You know. Verse 11, and Naomi said, turn again, my daughters, why will ye go with me? Are there yet any more sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? So Naomi at this point, she let them know, why you guys want to go with me? Why y'all want to go with me? Why don't you just stay here at your mother's house, get remarried? You know, why you want to go with me? I don't have any more sons. There's none in my wombs. And I'm not planning on being a lady through the night to go out and try to, you know, get pregnant to have sons. And even if she did, they were of age, so by the time the son get old enough to marry, they old ladies. So go back. You know, why you want to come with me? And so they were convinced that was the way to go. And she knew she was of age. She wasn't going to have any more sons. She was just going to go back and to Judith. And you got to think too, she's going back. Of course, she left. And so she's got a lot she got to deal with when she get there. You know, they knew her. Yeah, they knew her. And she
had property there.
They had property there.
They had property that
Yeah.
they had because her husband was one of the upright men in that country
Right.
at that time. But God is using them to what we see today.
Right.
What we see today.
You know, I think as I read the lesson, I'm thinking about Jay is moving to California. And, okay, so we've talked about it. And right at this point, I mean, had some hiccups. And we prayed. It looked like that's the way he's directing it. And the little hiccup we had was the rooms aren't available until maybe after Christmas. You know. Okay. But there's nothing that indicates that he shouldn't go. So, and that's the way you got to look at things. Yeah. Say again? You can't. And so you just gotta pray and get in that Bible, see what instructions, Ruth, for me, and commands that are there, and just move forward. And you'll know if he don't want you to go. All right, so verse 13. Yes. Would ye tarry for them till they were grown? Would you take care of them till they're grown and you wait? You know, would you wait for them? No. I mean, so, you know, for her sons, they wanted her to have sons, and she's asking, do y'all want to wait until they're grown? You know, would ye stay with them from having husbands? Nay, my daughters, for it is given me much for your sake that the hands of the Lord is gone out against me. Okay, so Naomi is asking her daughter-in-laws, you know, if you want me to have sons, you wait. She's basically saying it's too late. It's too late. The Lord is gone out against me. Now, she is not I didn't take it as she is condemning God for her situation. She realized that she's going through some stuff, and she realized that she's got to get back to God. That's the way I took it. So she wasn't condemning God. The Lord has gone out against me. No, she's just going through some things, and
Thank you. Yes, she's going through things, and a lot of times when we think everything has turned against us, we have a tendency to put the blame everywhere. And that's what she's doing here. The hand of the Lord is going out against me. She'll find out later that that's not true. That's not true. But desperate, what's the expression?
Desperate times.
Desperate times, people make, I can't even get it together right.
Desperate measures.
Yeah, desperate measures. But she is confused, if you will. And I like the way you explained it here, those previous verses. Naomi's being practical. Now, based on my studies, Naomi may be between 50 and 60, I don't know, somewhere in that neighborhood. But the daughters-in-law may be in their 20s. Mm-hmm. So they can marry again. Mm-hmm. They can marry again, that's for sure. And they are free to marry again. And we have to realize this is their home. It's not Naomi's home. Moab is their home. And they worship God's, small g, with an S on it. Mm-hmm. But Naomi worshiped the God, capital G, no S on it. Right. And so she's being practical. And she said, even if I got married today and got pregnant tonight, are you going to wait? You going to wait? Think about it, because they won't even be of marriage age until they're at least 20, and by then the girls are older. So Naomi is saying, you stay put. I'm going back home. You stay put.
I want to add to that too. Naomi is going back. She's going back without a husband. So in that time, it wasn't, you were a lower class person if you weren't married with a husband. They considered you low class. And of course, she'd taken her daughter-in-laws with her, so they were going to be considered low class too. So she's got a lot to go back to, which is family or home and God, of course. But she's got some things that she's going to go through when she get there. But she's willing to do that. She's willing to go back to God and to, get her life together, because she thinking that God has gone against her, but in actuality, he's not. He's bringing you back. What's that in the book of Luke? If you, the sheep, the 99 sheep, if one get lost, you leave the leave the 99 one and go get them. And then when you come back, everybody rejoice. So she's going to return. All right. That third text, and this is I really like this one. The loyalty of Ruth. Verse 14. And they lifted up their voice and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth caved unto her. And I want to read that New Revised Standard Version next to that. Then they wept aloud again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. Now, these two daughter-in-laws truly loved Ruth. They truly loved her, and you could tell in this verse here. But Orpah, she kissed her goodbye, and Ruth, Orpah kissed Naomi goodbye. Yeah, and Ruth, she clung to her. So let's look at these two types of love here. There's two types of love going on here. We have that Christian love, that Christian feeling. In this case, we got to have that love of God, and Ruth displays that. She's like, nah, I'm gonna clung to you. I want to go with you. I want to be with you, you know. But Orpha, she's like, I'm going back home. I love you. It's been real, but I'm gonna go on back and live my life at, you know, that's best for me. And Ruth, you know, she could have done the same thing. She actually could have done the same thing. But she's like, no, I'm hanging with you. And with Naomi. So she said, look. And she said, behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people and unto her God. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. And so Naomi is telling Ruth that Orpha is going back. She's gone back. And I mean, she didn't know nothing about Bethlehem, I'm sure. Again, she didn't believe in our God, with the big G. So she's like, I'm going back. I'm going to get my rest. Yeah. But Ruth was like, no, I'm not going. Verse 16, and Ruth said, entreat me not to leave thee or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Now, that's key here. That's key here. She's a pagan, Ruth. And to say that Naomi's God, big G, will be my God, that was important. That right there set the tone for her future life. And she showed that agape love, where it was unconditional to Naomi. She showed that. And so that's when she said, your God be my God, she's well on her way. And you can imagine if she felt that kind of compassion and that passionate about Ruth, Naomi, that she would, I guess if you look back over the years, she probably saw her praying and worshiping and her character and all, But that was key. Thy God will be my God. And verse 17.
May I make a comment?
Go ahead on, Jimmy.
Yeah. And 16 is the verse to take away. Mm-hmm. That's the verse to take away. It's used a lot in weddings and other activities. But when she says that, I'll go where you go, I'll lodge where you lodge, your people be my people. But when she says, your God will be my God, mm-hmm. Oh, that's it then. Ruth has made her mind up. As we say in these testimony services, her mind is made up and her heart is fixed. Ruth is going with Naomi, her mother-in-law. We shouldn't be too hard on Orpha. I think she came to her senses. Yeah. That's what happened. She came to her senses because, as Jose explained, Naomi was going to fair common. As Mama used to say, Ray, she was going to fair common as it was because she had no husband and she had no children. And back then, of course, in ancient Israel and even in ancient Moab, a woman who had no husband or children fared common. She ended up, there was no social security system as we have now, so she ended up being a prostitute, or either she had to do other things, if you will. And so Naomi is going to suffer enough as it was, And so she was releasing her daughters. That's why in verse 8, and I had to go back and study verse 8 so many times, go to your mother's house. She didn't say go to your father's house. I don't know whether you picked up on that or not. Go to your mother's house. She was releasing them to marry again. That's what it was. Go to your mother's house. And so Naomi again is being practical. I love you all. You've been good to me, but go back home. And Oprah, see you later, alligator. She took off.
Yep.
But Ruth decided to follow mom. And so in spite of what they're going to be up against, but what Naomi failed to realize, there was a male relative. There was back home that she failed to realize, or maybe she had just forgotten it, on her husband's side.
Thank you, Jimmy. And that was the custom too, that if the husband died, one of the relatives, brothers, would remarry that widow. And so that was the custom back in those days, or a family member. That's right. You know. Your brother. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Right. So that was important because, and we're going to jump real quick to Ruth. Ruth is going to get married, and his name is Boaz. So, and he was a relative of Naomi. So, in the end, you know, your God will be my God. It's going to work out for Ruth. It's going to work out for her. Yeah. So, verse 17, where thou die, will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me. So the New Revised Version, where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do thus to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you. And so Naomi is saying, where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. Where your God is, to be my God. And where you die, I'll die. So this is that agape love that Orpah wasn't willing to go. She loved her, but not to the extent of she wanted to be take Ruth and move to Bethlehem. She wasn't going to do that. But Ruth is, I'm going. And go ahead, Jim.
And when she says in verse 17, there will I be buried, Ruth closes the deal then, that I'm going to stay. But of course, I'm like Ray, though. I think I would have taken Oprah's path. I would have stayed back home. But Ruth decides to follow her mother-in-law, and she says, there I will be buried as well, and only death can separate us. Mm-hmm. She makes that powerful statement. Only death can separate us.
And that's that unconditional love. That's unconditional.
Mother. That's why she clings so close to her.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, she was married to the sons, and I mean, I'm sure they spent a lot of time together. She witnessed Naomi's character, and she's, you know, with us as Christians, and as we go out, we should show people how much we love God, and the things that He do for us, and that will make other people say, I'm gonna hang out with this guy right here, you know. And that's that feeling that that Ruth got from Naomi. I don't know who your God is, but I want to know Him. And if you're going back to Him, I want to go with you. And that's the way we should look at things today.
Well, that's what the folks in the world do.
Uh-huh.
When they're having a good time, they have a following. And so we should have a following as well. They should be able to see God in us.
Right.
But if we're not living for God, if we haven't been born again, we're just spinning our wheels. Mm-hmm. And I want to comment on what Jeanette said, that they considered Naomi their mother. If you go back to verse 12, and I forgot to mention that when we went over 12, but Naomi had been calling them daughters-in-law. But in verse 12, she says, turn again, my daughters. You note that? My daughters. So look at the distinction there. Naomi had grown to love both Ruth and Orpah. But Naomi knew what she had to face when she went back home, being a widow and being childless. She knew what she had to face.
All right. Verse 18. When she saw that she was steadfast-minded to go with her, then she said, speaking unto her. And then we got verse, it skipped. But look at the New Revised Version. When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her about go back. She said no more to her about going back. And then verses 19 through 20 are skipped. So real quick, so the two of them continued on their journey, 19. And when they came to Bethlehem, the entire town was excited by their arrival. Is it really Naomi? The woman asked, and she says, don't call me Naomi. Naomi means pleasant. She responded, instead, call me Mara. Mara means bitter. And the Almighty had made life very bitter for me. And 21, I went away full, but the Lord had brought me home empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord had caused me to suffer, and the Almighty has sent such tragedies upon me? So she's feeling a little guilty. She went away. She didn't, and now she's back, and she says she's empty, but she's not quite empty. Actually, she's coming back, so she's coming back to be replenished, to be full. She's coming back to God. So, again, she's not accusing God of anything. She's just expressing her feelings at this point. So, but she's coming back. God's going to fill her back up. Fill her back up. She's going to be back around believers. So being in a pagan country, you could get, empty real quick because, no telling what they believe in and what they're going through. Verse 22. So Naomi returned, and Ruth, the Moabite, her daughter-in-laws with her, which returned out of the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of the barley harvest. So things are going good back in Bethlehem. So Naomi returned together with Ruth, her daughter-in-law, who came back with her from the country of Moab. And they came to Bethlehem at the time of the barley harvest. So things are good now, again, in Bethlehem. And I guess I know the people came back to God. So they got plenty of harvest. Everybody's happy. And if I don't have any questions, I'm going to turn it back over to the... Go ahead.
Now this was in sync with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. The book of Ruth started with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Because if you realize what Ruth did, to have son with Boaz, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that lineage kept on going till it got to David, right? And David is, in the Bible, David is the father of Jesus, right?
It ended up, Naomi was David's great grandmother.
Right.
Yeah.
So she had Ruth had Jesse, and Jesse was the father of David.
So yeah, God was in it. I mean, they thought they were going through some stuff, and that's us. We gotta shine, because you never know how God can use you. Okay.